and welcome. I'm Chantal Kelsey, Senior Account Manager at the Live Group, and I want to thank you so much for joining us for this live webinar. We're actually broadcasting live from the Ned in London. It's a beautiful historic building, actually used to be the old Midland Bank, designed in 1924. So we're sat here actually enjoying the beautiful atmosphere. It's a great space for events, actually, hence why we're here today. It has about 10 different restaurants, 250 bedrooms. So again, we're just very privileged to be here today. We really want to thank them for their support. We'll actually be back here on the 10th of September for a meet and greet, but more on that later. We're here today to discuss the virtual events realm. It's a new face of virtual events, and we're going to be discussing about how this has changed over the years for the better. We have a brilliant case study to share with you today, as well as some expert opinions on the topic. But we very much want this to be a two-sided conversation, so please do interact with us. You can do so at the bottom of your screen. We'd love to hear your feedback on the topic. If you have any special questions that you want answered by our panelists, perhaps you've recently been tasked with the job of organizing your very own virtual event, or maybe you have an event format that needs a bit of a shake-up and you're thinking that virtual events might be the way forward. As I say, I'm joined by some expert panelists, so let me introduce them for you. First up, we have Ulrika Bruning, who's the EMEA project manager.
Hi, hello Chantal, and hello everyone online. Thank you for the introduction. I'm Ulrike, and I work as a project manager in learning and development for a global professional services firm. And I look after the financial services business across EMEA. So that is about 19 different countries spread across the continent.
Brilliant, thanks for joining us. And we also have my colleague from the Live Group, our head of content, Bruce Rose.
Good morning, Chantal, and good morning, everyone. My head of content it's a very weird and wonderful job title, but what it essentially means is I listen to our clients' problems, what they're trying to do, and I come up with solutions. Excellent. Very simple.
And then we have Nicola Pye, who's our learning leader for UK and I.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Chantal. Hi, everyone. So I work for the same professional services firm as Uli, and I head up one of the lines of business, head of learning for that. But the event that we're talking about was when I was head of our student induction programme.
Exactly. So we have some experts here. So as I say, please do send through your questions. I'll keep an eye on them here, and we'll try and get through as many as we can, but not before having an in-depth chat. So Bruce, do you want to kick us off and maybe give us a top-level concept of what the project CBS, which is the one that we're discussing today, what that was all about?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's probably easiest to start at the very beginning. What a very good place to start. There is on our website, there's a full in-depth case study, and I would encourage everyone, if you're watching this, if you're interested in this kind of thing, is to have a read of it. It goes into more detail than I'll be able to provide here, but it's a useful starting point. From my perspective, we were called in and really to enlighten the viewers. CBS, Core Business Services, was really a support group of people within the firm who basically weren't client-facing, but really helped out everyone that was client-facing. And this was a group of people that was disparate. They were spread throughout the EMEA region. It was prohibitively expensive to bring them together, and we needed to come up with a solution that would work for that. The interesting thing, and perhaps the reason, Nicola, why you're here, is that there was an early genesis of this concept. Because when we were looking at the brief, the thought popped in quite quickly. What we need is some form of digital way of bridging the content that we need to share with the audience and have them get involved. And that immediate thought pops into your head of, we need a virtual event. And virtual events have had for a very long time, and for good reason, a bad rep within the industry. It makes people think of bad technology, of crummy internet connections, of everything technical going wrong that could possibly go wrong. And that was the truth of it. That was the situation that many people found themselves in. But we knew equally that since virtual events were more of a popular thing, and there was a moment where they were really pushed by an awful lot of agencies, that the technology had matured a good deal, that internet connections across the regions had changed, and we could do something quite powerful. And we knew that already because of student induction, which was similarly a challenge more based on what we needed to do with a limited budget to bridge certain large groups of people together. So this wasn't, one bit of content going out to many different people from a single location. It was just bridging a few locations together, big groups of people from a central studio. And it worked. With an awful lot of planning and an awful lot of kind of everyone buying into it, that's almost the freeing thing, is no one wants to try these ideas until they're forced to. And once you've got a budget that can't be moved, or you've got deadlines that can't shift, we have to adapt. And so it was quite easy then to get people to buy into the idea, because we had to do it. Either it happened or it didn't happen, which is always the fun thing with events. It has to happen. And so we began to sketch this idea out. And even we were fighting it for a little while. Do we really want a virtual event? Are we sure about this? And we thought, no, if we have to do it, we're going to have to make it really good. We're going to have to think about absolutely everything, from the website that it's hosted on, to the platform that they use, to the content and how we share it. I mean, it's easy to think of a speaker session. There's things I can do talking in front of a large audience that I can't do on a live stream. It's something that we've all talked about here this morning, is right here. The only bridge we have to the audience is that lens there, and that lens doesn't react in a way a human does. And so you have to be quite careful with how you manage that interaction. And so we began to sketch it out. So earlier, this is where kind of you and I began to work on it, and really it was a case of knowing the rough shell of what we wanted to accomplish with a website, getting quite detailed in how we wanted to build it, and then bridging that into the day itself. And so again, it's covered in more detail in the article, but it was essentially a case of, we knew certain behaviors we wanted users to do. We wanted them to share a snapshot video of who they were, so they could introduce themselves to the wider CBS team, because a lot of people within CBS didn't know the people that they were working with. They had no idea that if you were in HR, you might not know that someone in IT was also CBS, that you were fundamentally part of the same team. And so we wanted to kind of break down those barriers. It really helped that we had buy-in from very senior partners in terms of also being a part of that. At the same time, we had a whole curriculum of content for people to watch, ways that they could network, get engaged with each other. I think at the end of the day, the tight timescales that we were under meant that we couldn't do some of the things we really wanted to do. So things we've talked about since then, like gamification and better networking tools, were kind of regrets for us, because we really wanted to make them even better. But that's something that we'll take forward into future projects.
And I was going to say, the interesting point that you make, am I right in thinking that the technology enabled a sense of community that otherwise didn't exist?
It's if you're siloed in a team, if you're a support for a lot of people that go and see clients on a daily basis, it's very easy to feel isolated. Obviously, if you're in a team which is all intercommunicative, it's fine. The isolation you feel is just within that team, not with other members. So it was the fact that if you are in assurance, for the sake of argument, you always had a good sense that you were in assurance, and that was almost harking to what you did. Whereas CBS could feel very malleable in that. You never had a sense of where you were. So it was a digital bridge. Because in an ideal world, with an unlimited budget and limited time and everything we needed, you could, in principle, just have them all in the same room over a week. And by the end of it, people would leave and they'd really know each other. That's not practical in the modern world. And so what can we do digitally to bridge that? Yeah. And that became the website. And so and then this is quite critically, because this is, from coming at it from, well, it's going to be a virtual live event over a single day. Well, suddenly we had launched roughly a month in advance, I feel.
I'd say.
And so we could have 4 weeks of engagement with the audience. Now, obviously, not everyone's joining the site at the same time. And when we looked at the analytics after the fact, what you saw is kind of a slow build as it got closer and closer to today. But the view counts and the videos are very positive. We knew people were engaged. We knew they liked the content. And that just served to build excitement into the day itself. And again, it's something we trialed a little bit with student induction, where, we have a good group of students that are joining a firm for the first time. They don't know what it's going to be like. For many of them, it's their first jobs, and we need to give them a sense of that before they come to this event where they're going to be asked to do all kinds of things. And they're probably more concerned about how do they get their laptop than actually how to become a good employee, things like that. And so we were building that excitement into the day. And of course, up until this point, it was still quite within the realms of comfort for us as an agency and for client side, I'm sure, because actually we'd done websites before, we've done video content before. We were still working with them on how it was built, but not actually putting the full test of it to the day itself. Because here we were going to have 2 streams that people could take a part of, so you could watch stream A or stream B, or you could take part in some kind of side Skype sessions, very small groups, but still enabled digitally. And all of this was happening on this single block of time, of which we had a studio, we had a remote studio as well, and then we had the Skype sessions happening. And, you can only do so much prep. You can only kind of cover all your bases as best as humanly possible. But there was this moment early on, and one of the first sessions we had was with 3 partners and a lovely hosting team who had come in, who the kind of host I loved was from the organisation. They were very, very good. Chennai, for listening, very good job. And you could see that they were engaging with the content they were talking about, and then we were getting the comments in, we were getting the questions in from the audience. You could see the view count rise. And that's when you knew, okay, this is it, this is working. And then we just followed that momentum throughout the day. I mean, there's always technical things that you have to overcome because it's live events. Things go wrong. It's the nature of the beast. And so that's why event agencies exist at the end of the day. But we knew it was working. And so we followed that through. The day went without a hitch, and we knew we were onto something special when that feedback began to come in.
Yeah, and I think this is probably a good point where only you can elaborate. As a project manager, obviously part of your job is managing the risk and running events. That becomes part and parcel of the job. But interesting to hear what your main key important drivers were for this project.
Yeah, I mean, as Bruce pointed out earlier, one of the key areas was that we have this big community, which isn't actually a community. So we're not only spread across the continent in different locations, different countries, different office locations, but it's also different functions. So you have finance, you have HR, you have recruitment, you have learning and development, you have brand marketing and communication. So it can feel quite disjointed at times. So what we were wanting to do was to raise awareness and to bring people together and to create that sense of community that, yes, you may be in different functions or in different offices or in different countries, but we are one function overall. And that was one of the main drivers that we wanted to do. And then looking at the opportunities that you have in bringing them together, there's obviously always a live event as an opportunity, but that comes with its challenges from budget to time out of the office to travel, which limits some people. Some people may not be able to travel to other locations or what have you. So we came up with the idea of doing it virtual, and that, of course, does come with its challenges as well, and misconceptions and fear of technology and fear of a lack of engagement are obviously some of the key challenges that we had from very early on, that people were very skeptical about, well, how are you going to make sure that people sit there and actually spend 7 hours of the day by themselves, themselves looking at a stream when they have emails coming through and Skype messages coming through, calls coming through, probably meetings scheduled in the diary. So those were all some challenges that we faced, and where we knew we need to build that and we need to manage the expectations. We were not expecting people to attend from the very first to the very last minute, but what we made sure is to build that into the planning as well. So to have some breaks in the agenda that allow people to go and grab lunch or to have a phone call or to pick and choose the sessions they're actually interested in. So we had people signing up in advance from the 2 different streams so that they knew exactly which sessions are running at what time and could structure their day around that. And overall it worked really, really nicely. And I mean, the overall feedback was very positive from people. We asked in our post-event evaluation the question of whether or not people would be happy to attend a future virtual conference, and 90% of people said yes. So that for us was just real confirmation and a real sense of achievement.
That's great. And it strikes me that the main points you make there of consideration for how you were going to structure the virtual event seem very much in line with the traditional format, which I hope viewers take a bit of peace of mind in that. You know, you still have to consider people's behaviors on site if you're having a physical event. The same goes for a virtual event, just slightly different. Mm-hmm. And maybe, Nicola, I'd be interested to hear, as a learning leader, how does this sort of virtual event fit in a wider strategy of events? Is there much difference between a traditional event and a virtual event in terms of maybe content?
I think there are clearly differences, and one of the differences is the consistency of experience you can provide when it's a live event. For us, we didn't have quite the same challenge of Uli across a continent, but we still had challenge of across a country. And so historically, when we'd run our student induction as a face-to-face event, you had some people that had, got up at 5 o'clock in the morning to come down from Glasgow versus some people who'd rolled out of bed and just come around the corner in London.
Slightly different experiences.
Yeah, so very, very different experiences. But I think in terms of actual content, I mean, certainly the way I approached my strategy was, this is still humans connecting to humans. This is still about our leadership wanting to give the best of our firm, give the kind of encouragement to our students so that they were really welcome to the organisation. So what I'd done previously with face-to-face events was just over the kind of probably the 2-3 months leading up to the event, you kind of have a few sit-down meetings. You get their ideas of what is it that you want to say to our new students, and then you start kind of shaping that into a format. What I needed for this particular event, because we were going into the live webcast format, was I then needed some kind of help with, okay, so how should we actually present that? What format will work? But in terms of content, I think really, I don't think anything different was going through my mind at all.
And Bruce, is that where you think an agency fits in, and an agency can then support a client, as we did with Nicola's project?
I mean, different agencies will have different appetites for this. There are some agencies which are just, hey, we do technical stuff really well, so we're not, you can feed us the content that you want, and we'll build a studio and we'll build cameras in, and we can connect the ports and make it happen. I think it's a key difference with Live Group, and of course I would say this, I'm very biased, you shouldn't trust me. It's the fact that my role exists, is we do really quite care about that content. So we then have a step where we can come in and speak to you, Nicola, speak to us, and say, actually, okay, well, this is the rough content idea you have. How do we translate that into an environment that's digital, that's going to work with that has, something as simple as, if you're in a conference, you can have everyone raise their hands, just a quick agreement. And it's a really good way of building rapport with an audience. It's quite powerful. If you're online and you want to do a poll in a webinar, you still have to fight like latencies with streaming technology and things like that. So you have to build that interaction in quite differently. It's why television works differently. It's the same basic principle. And so the best agencies will come in, they'll really try and get a handle of what it is you're trying to accomplish, not just take the order, and they'll begin to kind of map that out as a solution. And it probably, I would like to think there's a few people out there watching this saying, okay, well, I get the difference between traditional and digital events. I'm struggling to see the difference between virtual events and a live stream or a webcast, which is ultimately a very valid point. And I guess from my perspective, and when you think of virtual events, you think of like navigating your browser through a fake exhibition space, which is just kind of bonkers to me, because you're just transposing a traditional event into a monitor, which is not fun for anyone. Where it differs with a webcast is, okay, you've probably got a single stream of content. It's probably an hour like this, or maybe it's longer, but really it's just that one thing. People are going to YouTube, or they're going to a single sign-in destination and watching it. The difference with a virtual event is the choice that people are having throughout the process. So on the day, I have a choice of getting in one of several content streams, and all those content streams should have some form of interaction, some way that I can have a say with that speaker. I mean, the classic is kind of the conclusion of student induction, where you had all these students with all their many questions, and they were put to the leader of that field, which then in a typical day, they're not going to get any interface with that person. But then when you see that first question come through, and it's, what's your PIN number? And he answered it. That creates a connection that would never have happened. We saw it in subsequent years with which Game of Thrones character we cue, and suddenly we're enabling interaction in a way that's positive. It's not just getting a lecture, which is always the danger when you do this. It feels like someone's just talking at me. But if it's a virtual event, you're enabling that, and also you have this ability to do stuff before and after. You're putting content out there, you're getting a sense of what people want to hear, and you're helping them, working with them to shape the day fundamentally. And then after event, none of that content mysteriously vanishes. If I go to some of the conferences I attend as a delegate, which is always nice, as opposed to working with our events teams when we come behind the scenes, something I've struggled with today, just being here and not being behind there, is that, once you're there, it's amazing. And once you're gone, it has to exist here. in my mind if you're not watching the stream. That's such a lost opportunity. The virtual event, everything's captured, and you can go back and relive that day. And if you've watched one content stream, maybe you're going to go back and relive the other content stream. You're going to see the things that you missed because you made a decision on the day. You've had that immediacy, and that's the key thing. It's why we didn't just do video on demand, because a date, a time, gives people a sense of immediacy. It gives them a kind of a need to connect, and then they can get engaged after the fact. But it's a key, and it's something you spoke about earlier, and you even commented on, which is this to me is almost the industry in a nutshell. It's like, well, how do we guarantee people are going to watch it? If it's virtual, why aren't they going to be doing emails? To which my immediate thought is, if I'm at a conference, I can have my smartphone in my hand answering my emails while they're talking on stage. There's no eyeball tracking on me to make sure I'm paying attention to that speaker. You address that problem the same way you address any problem. How do I make the content exciting so that even if someone starts an email, they just hear it, they're interested, and then they tune in. You're never going to force people to pay attention to something, otherwise they'll just tune in or kind of like looking dead-eyed at you. So it's the same, you approach some of the problems the exact same way. You just then need to filter it through a kind of agency's perspective, or sometimes you need to listen to the experts, because we don't know the firm as well as you guys know the firm, so we have to take your lead on things. But that's what a partnership is. It's working together to make something better.
I think, Bruce, to go to your point about how do you make sure people are engaged, again, I think perhaps one of the misconceptions around a virtual live event is that you have to be sat at your kind of quite boring desk, just sitting looking at a computer screen. And certainly with student induction, we had groups together watching the live broadcasts. And what I heard, I mean, I was busy with you in the studio, but what I heard from the people who were in those rooms was that there was a bit of banter going on in the rooms. There was, should we ask a question? When the PIN number question came in, can we think of an even more outrageous question to ask and submit? And so
make them sweat.
And I think that's another thing to consider is you can have a little bit of the real world and the virtual world coming together at the same time.
I think it is a very good point, because it was one of the things where we now go as a lesson learned. It's probably something we should have encouraged more, and especially in our case where people may be in different functions. They may be in the same office, but if you work in finance and someone else in brand marketing and communications, you don't necessarily make that connection. And I think it is one of those areas where there's a lot of opportunity there. If you use the time in advance of the event and sort of encourage people to see who else is in your office location. Maybe you want to book a meeting room together, you want to watch it together. It helps you to be less distracted because everyone is sitting there watching the same content, and B, it also increases the networking opportunities, because that is something where a lot of people feel with virtual events it's something that can get lost, and I agree with that. You will not have the same type of networking that you have in a face-to-face event. It's just how do you find ways of almost compensating or finding different ways of encouraging that networking. And I think student induction is a great example there, where you have people in the same office, and you may not get to know people from other offices directly, but you know the people in your office well, and that's a big achievement. So
it's probably where we would bring the technology in as another enabler of that. So actually, if you're coming at it, okay, we're going to be broadcasting this day, you can watch it on your home desktop. Also, if you go to this part of the website, you can find other people in your region that want to watch it with you, and you can organise little viewing parties, which sounds a little crazy, but it happens. Yeah. I mean, there's a very famous eSport event. I mean, electronic sports, people don't know, but it's pretty much an industry that's driven by streaming, because it was, people were trying to get these video games out there. People watching competitive video games is not going to attract traditional TV people to get involved, because they're not going to be worried about selling the advertising. So instead, it was enabled all through streaming. Giant platforms like Twitch exist because there was such demand for it. And so the International is this big sporting event for one of the games, and they have a part of their site where it's like, hey, if you want to organize a viewing party, here's a toolkit to help you do so. Here's also pubs that are also streaming it and things like that. So absolutely, we can use technology as an enabler to make that happen, because then you get more of almost like a hybrid event.
Yeah. And I think the technology is one thing, but there's also something there around the positioning of the event, the leadership buy-in. I think it makes a very big difference when, from an organizational perspective, if you have that leadership buy-in, and you mentioned it earlier, we did, luckily, we had our partner sponsors really engaged and up for it. And then it can send a very different message if they are endorsing people to take their time out of their day job and actually focus on the conference, because it is for them, it is in their own interest and benefit to watch it and then to take the content away from it. It does help if you have the official allowance to actually take the day off and watch what you like. So I think that is something from a planning perspective that I would encourage people to do, to really make sure that it is not just if you have some time, maybe you want to zoom in and tune in at some point, but this is happening, please make the time to watch it, because it can make a massive difference.
Absolutely.
And just going back briefly on, you talked about the longevity of virtual events. And I was interested that one of you pointed out that perhaps with a virtual event, there's an increased opportunity for making the event last longer in people's minds. Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah. I think there's several elements to that. Number one, if you have a live event and you record it, the actual quality of the recording can't compare, because it was designed for a live audience with a live interaction. So even if you film it, record it, and have people watch it afterwards, it's not the same feel. But if you do it with a virtual event, it's designed and set up in a very different way for people to watch it remotely. So if you take the content after, it's a lot more valuable for people to rewatch or to watch again if they've missed it on the day. So I think there's certainly something there where you can, by hosting it longer, where you can ensure that maybe people have missed it on the day. Because if you're looking at our project, for example, we are spread across Europe, so you need to consider time zones, for example. So maybe some people may have missed the last session because they had to go home. So with that, it's a lot more suitable to watch on demand after. But it also comes down to what Bruce was saying earlier, to build a whole plan into the engagement pre, during and post. And with a platform like we had, you have an opportunity to continue hosting things. And we started off with Friday communications, where every Friday we would send out a newsletter to the same audience and announcing new content that's being uploaded. Small snippets, sometimes longer videos, sometimes small snippets, sometimes maybe just some PDF documents or whatever it may be, different types of content. And you can really keep people engaged for longer.
Yeah. And Nicola, would you agree with that? If the content was also specifically learning, I guess you can then bring in a wider audience.
Yeah, totally.
Or
and
add to people's learning.
You can. I mean, and we've used some of the content in kind of different shapes and sizes since. And I think the other thing is, I think that, to have a successful learning event, there's kind of two parts to it. There's specifically, you want people to remember the content, but of course, something like an induction, there's a feeling you want people to remember as well. And so we did things like we got people to take selfies and submit them onto the website, and we did like a kind of montage video of the selfies. And I think that's not going to remind people, oh yeah, I learned this about what I need to do on day 2, or this is, but it is going to remind people of, oh, that felt really good. The new firm that I'm working for has just really invested time and energy, and leadership are committed to that.
Yeah, it goes back to like bridging that community, that sense of community.
And I think my learning from when we ran Student Induction is, I kind of wish we'd done more of that. We did do the kind of selfie montage video, but we had this amazing studio set up, and I wish we'd taken the opportunity to kind of film some stuff that we could have then used as perhaps a follow-up, or a month down the line, our chairman saying, "Hi, it's me again. Like, how you doing?
You thought you were done with me, and I'm back."
Yeah, and those are sorts of things that I think the more you can think about it beyond, for us it was a 2-day event, but the more you can think about it, the pre-bit is absolutely vital, but that post element to it as well can be really useful.
Yeah, I agree, because we did some of it, but I think it slowly started to become less and less, because even for us as a team, you work on a project by project basis, and then once it's wrapped up, it's hard to keep the momentum going. So I think from a planning perspective, again, it's something that if you want to run a virtual event, make sure that you factor in the resources that you need for afterwards, to have someone there who is sort of driving it even 2, 3, 4 months after the event, because you have the technology, you have the hub built, you have everything set in place, and then sometimes it's a shame that based on a lack of resources or a lack of planning, you can't really take it on for much longer than that. So certainly one of the lessons learned and some of the tips that I would share.
There always will be lessons learned, aren't there?
It's not a case of, if you build it, they will come. Just because that video is hosted does not mean that anyone will watch it. It needs that same planning phase. You have it in the pre, you have it during, and then you have it after, so that you are coming up with strategies to bring people to the content, because they will, they're moving on to other things. And also, it's rare to find content that can stand the test of time, because the world changes so quickly. And therefore there'll come a point, actually, some of the stuff that we did even back then, you wouldn't show it now. Not that it was terribly controversial, but it's just out of date now. The world has changed. And so you kind of get this sweet spot of probably about no more than 6 weeks that you're going to be driving people to that content, and then you really see that diminish.
I think you raise a very good point there, because it really depends on your content as well. If you have something like a regulatory update or whatever it may be, it is dated content, and you know that 6 months later, whatever has been shared there may be out of date. So I think in our case, we had a lot more around general skills, soft skills, if you like. I don't really like the term, but I think that's it, around growth mindset, around teaming. Those were some of the areas that we had, and I think that is the kind of content that is still going to be valid in a year's time from now. So it's certainly something to factor in when you build the content. What is the kind of content that may be outdated after a while that you can't use, and what is the kind of content where you'll get a lot of leverage from even afterwards.
Yeah.
And that sorry, so I know you were going to say something. It really does depend on something you said, Nick, is that actually when I work with speakers, a lot of them almost approach it with, well, if I say the information I need to say, well, then I've done a good job. Good, pat on the back, off I go. And that's not what it's about at all. Like, certainly in events, in that live events, whatever they may be, and that's probably the big thing I'd want to get at in this webinar, is actually we're not saying that, okay, every event is going to be like this. Unless you're doing this virtual event, you're a crazy person. That's not it at all. What we are doing is creating a large toolbox on which to draw. Sometimes it's going to be appropriate, sometimes it's not. Regardless of that, in terms of what we need to do, it's not about sharing information. If it was about that, we could do it through video. We could do it through really well-crafted copy or emails. A lot of what we're doing is share it, like we're changing emotions. We are creating a state within the audience that is a feeling sometimes. It's almost inspirational. I always say to speakers, don't think about what you want to say. Think about how you want the audience to feel when they leave. And if we start from there, then we can craft something around that. And that's the timeless content. I mean, it's no surprise to me that the teaming sessions, the growth mindset stuff, the more timeless content was the most popular when you really looked at it. When you looked at the stats after the fact, is those sessions were the most attended. They had the greatest view counts, because people always want that timeless content. Everyone wants to create it. It's harder than that.
And that piece you said about creating an emotion, and I really agree with that. And I think that's something that I probably put a bit more effort into. Perhaps borderline became a bit obsessed by it in the lead up to the event, was how we're going to create this emotional connection. And actually, it was surprisingly easy because we had really good speakers. We'd done our prep with them. And then we had these, so we had leadership speaking, and yeah, don't get me wrong, they were fantastic. But we then also had some people from just across our organisation who had these really quite heartfelt stories that they were talking about, how they'd felt supported, how they felt that they connected, and people had kind of encouraged them to be themselves across our organisation. And, I won't lie, I had a little tear in my eye hearing some of those stories. And you're kind of like, oh my goodness, this is real. And all that kind of angst I had, that worry I had about, is this just going to feel like really, one-dimensional and not feel particularly real, I think in some ways was easier to bring to life in that kind of people's comfortably sitting on a sofa in a nice set than if you're standing up on a stage in front of 600 people. You can't connect.
We live in a very digital world, don't we?
Yeah.
So it's a kind of a reflection of how we probably take in stories day to day ourselves, with our devices, etc.
And you think particularly for our population who are kind of all young, sort of.
But I would agree with that. It's the emotional bit that works best, because one of our speakers actually was saying that he does a lot of prepping speakers on how to deliver on stage and what have you. And he had this one example of someone who was an excellent speaker, did not make a single mistake, but could never really get through to the audience. And then what he taught him was to be more human. And I think that was the whole message that we tried to send as well. We started off with a panel discussion, and we had our leadership team there, our managing partner, deputy, and the function, the head of our function, and they had a little panel discussion. And the questions that were coming in were a lot more about the human side rather than the business strategy. And I think that's why it kicked off the day in the right direction. And it was that human element that people wanted to see. And the three of them were interacting nicely with the host. They were laughing, they were comfortable. And that really helped to drive the engagement and set the tone right straight from the beginning, because that is the kind of feeling that you need to bring into every single event to make it successful.
Yeah, a lot of what we do is create the atmosphere where this stuff can happen, because everyone chases control at all points. I really want people to feel this, or we're going to script it so that we absolutely get it down. Of course, no one trusts that because it's not real. Exactly. Whereas actually, when you think about, and I know the session you're talking about, because it was about how people had used the resources in the firm to kind of, one of them had quite bad anxiety. There were the others with kind of other things that they'd brought, and things had been changed for them. And all we really did was give them a tee up and put them in a comfortable environment where they could share their story. And kind of tying this back into a virtual event, it is easier to coach someone in a studio environment, and we all like to fear the lens. But it's a lot easier to share a very personal story in front of quite a small room with a few crew than it is in front of an entire stage. And we can do a lot more in terms of sharing certainly stories from vulnerable people and people that might not ordinarily like to be kind of told, but they're quite critical to hear. And that's almost something that is unique to a virtual event or a webcast and things like that. And kind of from that, it's same with the CBS event. The thing that stuck with me was, I think it's the sector lead. She had a follow-up after that initial panel session where she spoke about her family life in a just open, honest way. And you see all those questions coming in, and it's reflected in the audience. I last 2 weeks ago, I was doing a student induction webinar, wouldn't you know? And we are lucky enough to have a load of people that are relatively new in the firm. They've been kind of 2 years, and they're all kind of happy, bright-eyed people. And some of the questions are like, oh, I've really worried about this qualification. But the vast majority are, I'm an introvert. How do I make friends? What can I do socially? How do I connect to my colleagues? Am I going to feel a little bit sidelined? They are really emotive questions, really critical things to answer that we need to get a handle on in terms of important content. It's not just, here's how you switch on your laptop.
And going back to, so you're absolutely right about the people who are speaking. It's much easier to make them feel comfortable and almost allow them, or they can allow themselves to be vulnerable. But I think also for the people that ask the questions. So if I think back to when we used to have 600 people in a huge room, it really was the bravest and the boldest that would be prepared to put a mic in front of them and ask those questions. And
maybe had really important opinions that were too scared to be
absolutely
shared.
And so you now get a much more broad range of people who are submitting and asking those questions. And you still get the kind of bold, the funny people who ask the PIN number question, but you also get people who they will just want to find out about one of our leaders' family life or work-life balance, or how did they cope when they were first starting out.
It's funny. It's almost as if you're reading into our viewers' minds, because one of the questions we had was about speakers. A lot of the speakers that we maybe have at our traditional events maybe aren't accustomed to being on a virtual event. So how do you approach sort of, I don't want to say coaching, but advising them on how?
Coaching initially. Like, a lot of times I've worked with people that are very good in front of an audience, and some of them assume, well, if I'm good in front of an audience, camera's easier, therefore I'll be just as good. And then you put them in front of the camera and they freeze because they're not looking into people's eyes, and they're not having, just us around this table talking to each other. The fact that we go is a massive help. It makes people feel confident, and suddenly that's robbed from them. All they have is that cold lens, and they freeze. And so a lot of that is just really coaching them and making them comfortable and confident.
But it's also the situation and the format that you put them into. So
talk for 6 hours without any breaks.
Yeah, it's going to be hard. So what we did for our chairman was we had him being interviewed. So rather than him having to just kind of broadcast out, that's never going to feel like a natural. It's going to feel like the Queen's speech. Whereas we had one of our previous year's students who turned out to be an absolute pro and complete natural, and she just presented questions, interacted with him. And then one of our other speakers, our managing partner for talent, she actually had a group, the session Bruce and I have just been talking about, she had a group of people, and that just that gave her confidence and comfort that if she didn't have content, somebody else was going to have content. It just needed to be and I think we said that to them quite a lot, didn't we, Bruce? It just needs to be a conversation. Don't try to make it anything other than just a really natural conversation.
And I think this is where an agency comes in as well, because it's not something that I could coach a speaker on, but this is where then someone external can bring a lot of value by just going, look, this is what you want to keep in mind, this is where you want to focus on, this is the advantage of auto cue, this is the disadvantage of it, and just someone to kind of talk them through and to remind them of what to think about, what to consider, pauses, all of those things work slightly differently in front of a camera than with a live audience. And I think this is the value that can be added then by having an expert in the field, but also, as Nicola said, having different setups for different people and what they feel comfortable with, because we had a handful of speakers that were so comfortable and so good in presenting, standing up and presenting in front of a camera, and the flow was fantastic. But we also had other sessions where it was a conversation between two people and they could bounce off each other. We had a panel discussion. We had a couple of sessions on the other stream where you just change up. I'm coming back to content, but you just change up the content slightly. We had sessions in there called Ask the Expert, where someone just presented on their session and then have a live Q&A on the other stream after. So even for the audience, you can see it, you can see the person presenting, and then you have an opportunity to have that interaction with them. So I think it is depending on what your speaker is comfortable with. There's a lot of different ways of making sure that they're comfortable.
And that's all part of the consultative
period. Don't force your speakers to do things they don't want to do, because it's not fun for anyone. You, much like we'd say virtual events are riding of the toolbox, within any sort of broadcast, there's a whole range of production approaches you can take, whether it's just a Q&A, whether it is presenting direct to camera with a lot of auto cue support, whether it's someone just teeing up a video because the video is really nailed and they're gonna tee it up, then they're gonna come back, answer some questions live, and then they're gonna tee up another video. There are things that we can do to get the most out of that person, and it's quite critical then that we put them in a situation where they can really show their best. I mean, similarly, it affects the audience as well. Something we talked about earlier is that if you're at a 600 people, 1,000 people in front of you in a massive plenary, you only get the boldest, most kind of brave people to take the stage and hold a microphone. Equally, you only get the boldest, brashest people from the delegate side who put the hand up for a microphone to be passed around. And those people always dominate the discussion. Whereas once we democratize things through technology, everyone gets more of a say.
I'm conscious that we need to get more questions in, or answer some of the questions that are coming through.
So just yes or no answers.
I'm guessing this is because it's resonating with a lot of you, is that it sounds like a really interesting concept, the virtual event. So if I wanted to organize one myself, where would I start?
Panic. That's the first thing. You need to... I mean, you both of you will have quite different... I would always go to an agency, let's do everything, it'd be amazing. You kind of want to start with, what am I trying to accomplish? That was the benefit we had with CBS, is that we started with actually quite a clear goal, is we want to bring these people together, make them feel part of the same community, and still teach them a few things. That's something we can work with. Student induction is we need to touch on some kind of bare bones basics. Here's how you are actually going to be a part of this company. but also we needed to spur some emotions at them. We need to make real the fact that if there's a support for mental health, that's great to know. Here's the reality behind that. And we could bring those stories to life. So step one would be have a set of objectives that you want to accomplish. And then you want to approach someone that can deliver it. I mean, that's where an agency would come in. Obviously, you want to speak to your internal stakeholders and then speak to an agency, speak to a few and get a sense of how they would approach it. That would be how I start. I don't know whether you feel that.
No, I would agree with that. I think it's several conversations where you need to start, and I would always start with the outcome as well. What is it that I want to achieve from this? Because then that usually determines the approach you're taking. If you want to place networking as your number one objective, I'd probably say you may have to bring people together into one location. But if your objective is something different that automatically leads into a virtual approach, then you can take it from there. So I think it's really down to understanding what it is that you want to achieve. And then for me, one of the key areas is as well, talk to your stakeholders early on. Talk to your stakeholders and share what you're having in mind, validate your objectives, make sure everyone's on the same page, and then go out to an agency, to several actually, because everyone will bring in different ideas and approaches, and then take what suits best for your objectives and something that your stakeholders feel comfortable in as well.
And I totally agree, Leah. You can't speak to... I mean, I actually started kind of the prep work with our stakeholders at the end of the previous year's event, the face-to-face event, kind of said, this might be the last year that we run it like this. How do you feel about that? And just started to kind of gently take them to a new place in their thinking. The other thing that we've tried to do is we've always tried to engage people who are like the audience. So for us, that's relatively simple. It's a case of kind of bringing... When we're starting to think about this year's event, we'll bring people from last year's student induction and just get their thoughts and kind of run some ideas past them. Sometimes they come up with some great ideas as well. And I think that's another great starting place is, okay, this is what we're trying to achieve. This is how we're thinking of doing it. What do you think? Do you think that will work? And I think that can be a great way to start as well.
It's a good point, because essentially you need to ask your audience as well what it is that they want, because it's one thing for yourself and your stakeholders to make a judgment call on what it is that people might be interested in, but it's a different story to then run it past them and see whether or not there's buy-in from the actual business, from your clients in this sense.
Because there might be some out there who cannot get leadership to buy into the idea, and if that happens, it can't happen. Even if it's like the worry is almost, if they don't want it, fine. We'll come up with something different. Might not be as good, might not achieve the objectives quite as well, but it'll be enough to pass muster. The worst is when you've got kind of leadership that's half engaged with the idea, because then it can become poisonous. Of go ahead and do this, and then I'm going to kind of snipe at it throughout. Like, you have to sell that idea, because the last thing you want, watch this virtual event maybe if you really want to. Like, that's not helping anyone. And so if it takes getting engaged with them early, if it takes asking, if you're going to agencies, show us where you've done this in the past and show us how it's successful.
And one of the things that was bizarrely so helpful to us when we were trying to get that engagement was when you came back to us with just a mock-up of what that production set was going to look like, and it looked kind of really high quality. It looked TV studio-ish, and it was high quality. But that mock-up, being able to go to my stakeholders and say, this is what I've got in mind, and this is, kind of now imagine yourself on that sofa being interviewed by someone who's really slick, really bright, and it did help get the buy-in. It kind of, I think everyone needs something to be able to imagine. And
it's hard to take someone's word for it. Trust me, it's going to be great.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to be on that studio, so why don't you show me something more?
From a traditional to something slightly different. Even if there's a real need for it.
Yeah.
You kind of have to, One of the other questions we had was, and Uli, you mentioned about time zones and when a virtual event is taking place, how do you account for that? So do you think events like this can work globally?
I think they can, but you have to be really careful with your planning. I think it really starts with setting the agenda up so that you know it's going to work for different time zones. And I think with that, it's probably not going to be done in a single day. You'd probably have to look at 2 consecutive days because you need to capture sort of the Eastern time zones, the Western time zones. I think from within a continental European perspective, it's okay because you're sort of looking at 2 to 3 hours of time differences at a max. So you'll at least get the midday as your main bits and pieces for the key sessions to run. I think with a global audience, the overlap is slightly smaller. So you might want to look at breaking it down into several days and decreasing the time you're broadcasting on each day so that everyone can have that lap over. Or you think about the content and look at, is there specific content that's more suitable for, say, Europe versus the US? So if that's the case, then you broadcast that while the US are still asleep. I think there's different ways, but it really comes down to the planning and how you structure the day and just factor in the time zones and the content that may be relevant for certain areas and regions, but not for others.
Bruce, is there a way of tracking the viewership?
No. Yes. I mean, that's probably one of a key difference with a virtual event is that you have a lot of data points. You know, with traditional events, tracking has got better. I mean, you see all kinds of companies with like real-time audience location and here's the delegate throw through your venue, and apps are doing an awful lot to help with that. Because it's in an environment controlled entirely by the people creating it, we can give an awful lot of data points. So even before someone arrives on the day to watch the stream, we'll have known what videos that they've interacted with. We can know the topics that they're most interested in. They filled in a delegate profile, so we know quite a lot about them. And then we can, from a stream perspective, we're tracking the viewership, tracking how long they're watching for, if they disconnect at certain points. Now, obviously, we don't then go to our clients and say, you really want to use this to make sure they watch it. It's not for that. It becomes a more passive thing. Okay, well, here's a 6-hour block, and we really dipped in the middle bit. So what can we learn from that? How do we shift that content? Equally, this session was really popular. How do we do more like that? And then, it's part of also combining that with follow-up. You don't know, and fundamentally, I don't know whether someone disconnects from a live stream because of a technical issue that they've had at their end or a content issue that we've had in planning it. And that's why we ask follow-up questions. It's why we can never know enough. You always want to know more because you always want to plan the perfect event. That's an impossibility. So you kind of have to plan the best you can with the data available, and be happy with that. The thing with a global one of these, I mean, there was a time a few years back where we were looking at a bank wanting to do a global jam, as they called it, which would involve 4 studios in the main kind of time zones that would bridge content between them, each talking to their local audience before throwing off to the next audience to pick up. And it would almost become a company-wide event for a multinational that would exist pretty much predominantly virtual with breakouts of people in the same room. Technically, of course, it's possible. From a cost perspective, it's also vast, and you wouldn't come into it saying, well, this is a cost-saving measure. It's actually just something quite cool, and from a production standpoint. And then by the end of it, you would have a whole host of content then to share with other people. So it's possible. Would you want to do it? Depends on what you're trying to achieve. As with everything, I've gone into your earlier question in saying that, but first one, absolutely, and stats and tracking a good partner will work with you to help you understand that data and what that means, and that's quite critical for future planning if we're going to improve on it in subsequent years and things like that.
And so that's one of the ways that virtual events have come a long way, the data tracking and all that. Are there any other ones that stick out in your mind, having been doing this for a while?
I mean, it's something in that the case study article we wrote is that there was a time where Flash was king and everything had to go through Flash, and it enabled what we called the rich web. It's a horrible term, but if you're playing video and things like that, predominantly done through Flash or Real Player, all these kind of weird plugins. Now that all just works in the browser, and so really, if you have Chrome, if you have Internet Explorer, if you have Firefox, this stuff tends to work. Even IT departments, which used to just block everything, is now becoming a little bit more open in how content is accessed. So that's been a big shift. It's just the technological barriers to entry. You don't need anything special. You just point your browser at a location and then you're in. The second thing which has impacted quite a lot is better kind of internet speed penetration across the country and also globally, is that internet speeds are getting quicker, and therefore they can access the content far more easily. That's combined at the same time with streaming technology being quite different. So when we stream, for example, if you've got a brilliant connection, you get the cleanest, crispest 1080p feed. If you don't, you get a slightly lower quality version. If you have quite a bad connection, you're probably only going to be able to hear it, but at least you can get some semblance of the content. And so basically the sea change that's happened over the kind of the past few years technology-wise has been it being more accessible, which has been absolutely vital. What we are going to see now over the next 10, 20 years, which will make this more important, is the world changing around it. Climate change is the issue of this era. If you're bringing a load of people into the same location, you have to think of the carbon impacts of that. You have to think of the environmental impacts of that. This allows you to do it in a way which isn't as impactful on the environment. And then perhaps, this might be my edge case brain kicking into gear, and actually this isn't going to be an issue for now. Terrorism used to be the hot button topic, and people didn't want to bring people in the same location. For the same company, I remember an event in Paris being cancelled shortly after those horrendous terrorist attacks. That became quite a big thing. And a digital event lets you bridge content in a way that doesn't have a safety risk associated with it. But, from a health perspective, we're seeing people wanting to travel less. They're not in the office all the time. People want to engage with a way that's comfortable. And this will become more important. It's part of the toolkit. It's not, okay, this and then all the problems are solved, but it helps address it.
That's exactly what I was going to say, yeah, because we don't all work. We work slightly remotely even now. So is events just kind of being now, needs to be a bit of a reflection of our day-to-day. And I'd be interested, maybe Nicola, you can add to this, but virtual events in the realm of a strategy that is around learning. Because we're trying not to say that virtual event is the be all end all, but it could be a solution in a gamut of events, traditional format or not.
Yeah, and I think absolutely they have their place. And for me, I think it's kind of less and less about can they do the same job, but it's actually let's just recognise they do a different job and kind of really value that. So really large audiences, being connected at the same time, all of the things Bruce has just talked about, the kind of social responsibility perspective, the well-being perspective, they can be massive factors. And so I think as a learning leader, more and more we should be thinking, what's the value that we're going to get from that face-to-face contact versus what's the value we can get? And I see them as being two different values, but potentially both equally as important. And for some, the face-to-face will outweigh, and for others, the virtual will massively outweigh.
And for you, Uli, as project manager, I'm sure you've got a long list of events that you're running this year, but would you do this type of event again? And would you kind of mix it in with your other more traditional ones that you have running every year?
I think the blended approach of mixing it in with some of the traditional events that we're running will work nicely, because it just gives you a different type of touch point with your audience. I don't think in the long run they will entirely replace face-to-face events. I don't think that's possible because of the networking that we discussed earlier as well, where sometimes it's just inevitable, you need to bring people together. But also, looking at the carbon footprint, looking at even just the mobility aspect, having people off-site at an event for 2 days plus the travel time, it's a lot of time, while a virtual event can save you that travel time. It does make it easier. Some people may not be able to travel because of family commitments, any possible reasons really, so it does open the doors for people that typically wouldn't attend face-to-face events. So I think there's a lot of value to it, but again, it needs to be a mixed approach. You'll probably end up having a couple of standard webcasts for your quick updates. You'll have a couple of virtual events every year to just reiterate some of the content and messages. You'll have a face-to-face event as a celebration perhaps, or as a networking event. So I think we are going to see a whole mix and a whole variety of events moving forward, and they all have their place.
Physical will not go away anytime soon. It just won't. I stayed at a hotel last night. I had to do a WhatsApp video chat with my daughter, and it was lovely seeing her and hearing from her. It's not the same as holding her in my arms. You know, anyone that tells me that traditional events are dying needs to face that reality quite quickly.
And we're very much not saying that today, are we?
No, absolutely not.
What solution you've got in your toolbox?
Yeah, the change that will happen, I think, is as the working world shifts, as there are different expectations about the work that needs to be done by the average person in the day, suddenly the barriers that means actually we can host a traditional event at the moment are actually still quite low. You know, budgetary ones are probably the most important. But those will actually, that barrier will increase slowly. At the same time, we'll see the barriers for virtual events, which used to be sky high because they used to be terrible and no one wanted to do them. So you really needed a very thin set of things that would let you do them. That's just going to shift. We're going to see a much more greater balance across the industry. And that's only a good thing because it means we're creating solutions that work, not just we're doing a massive stage set production in a live environment because it's what we've always done and we hate change. The industry's been resistant to change for quite a while, and this is the start of that shifting.
Right. I think that's probably a good way to end. We're nearly out of time. So just to kind of summarize, if there are final few points, the technology that we have now to run virtual events has allowed us to bring in communities that might otherwise have not existed. We can still very much get that human connection that you get in a physical event. We can get that in a virtual event. There are some considerations to be made, mostly around content, but also around your speakers. It might mean that you do bring an agency and you help coach them. Actually, sometimes you can get a lot more out of some speakers, especially if they're delivering more of an emotive sort of topic. And as well as the audience, as you pointed out, that are watching can be a bit braver if they're watching from the comforts of their desk or whatever. And then if you want to run your own event, virtual event, main consideration is from the offset, think about your objectives. Get your stakeholders buy-in nice and early, plant the seed nice and early. And if you are doing things on a global scale, perhaps think about breaking it out over the course of a few morning sessions or a few days.
And then come to live group.
Whatever
you do, because that's the end point.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, everyone who's joined us today for the live webinar. As I said earlier, we will be back here at the NED, and massive thank you for them for allowing us to be here today. We will be back on the 10th of September for a breakfast meet and greet. So that's your opportunity to have more in-depth chats with some of our experts. So if you are interested, you should register by emailing my colleague Sim. I believe the contact details are coming up on the bottom of the screen now. Places are limited, so we'd encourage you to register nice and early. But otherwise, thank you so much to our guests today for being here, and especially to you all for watching. So thank you and goodbye.